In this video I'm going to show up how to set up the access permissions to certain areas of the application for a common site. The first thing we need to do in order to set this up in builds 5.4 is to log in as the Keyhouse user, the administrator user. And when you go into build 5.4 and you look at the screens, you will notice that if you go into the setup screen, every user will have full access to all of these. That of course needs to be changed, so we'll go and set up the users so that only the authorized users have access to this sort of functionality. So the first thing we need to do is go to the user setup here, and looking at these we need to determine which ones of these users are actually going to be supervisor users. These are the site administrators who will always have complete access to absolutely everything in the application, all cases and so on. By default there's only one user like this, which is the ADM user, this user that logs in as Keyhouse, and you will not be able to remove this from that user. There will always have to be one user who has to have complete access to the entire application and everything in the database. That's this user here. But if you need to, you can pick another user and make them a supervisor as well. I'm not going to do that here because there's no need for it. One user is usually enough. The next thing we're going to do then is to set up the profiles that will determine how the users are going to access the application. So the first thing we're going to do is click on Profile Control Access. Bring that screen into the frame. And we'll look at this here. And you see at the moment there are no profiles defined. The first profile that we're going to create is a full access profile. Now this would be a user. Anybody who has this profile would be a person who has complete access to everything in the application except the actual supervisor roles to maintain users and so on. So we'll go over to user administration here and we'll uncheck that box. And leave everything else checked. We then go to the handlers tab here. We'll highlight the entire lot. We'll pick full access profile here and click link handlers. Now we've set up the most basic access for all users. And that would be to have full access to the application except to set up users and so on. So let's see what that looks like. We're going to log in as a user now. So we're logged in as JJ, and if you go to the setup screen here, see this user can no longer maintain users, and so can any other user in the system cannot actually access users. In order to allow somebody to set up users and so on, you will need to give them access to that functionality. So let's go and do that. So we'll log in as Keyhouse again. And we go into the setup here, back to the user setup, and we'll say, well, hang on a second, even though this person isn't a supervisor, they should be able to maintain user profiles. So we'll go into this screen, the Keyhouse Control Access Maintenance, Handler Control Access. We'll go to JJ, and you see he has also got the usual full access profile, which doesn't give you the user setup functionality, but that's easily changed. We'll tick this box for this user. So even though this user is part of this profile, and in the profile this option is unchecked, for an individual user you can override that and check the option again. So that sorts that out. So let's log in again as JJ and see what that does. So we're here again, we'll log in using Windows ID. There's JJ again, we go to the setup, and there's the user setup.